In this clip, we're going to talk about the Roto Brush tool inside of After Effects. So if you want to follow along, you can go to the description of the video and download the assets that you're going to need for this tutorial. So what is the Roto Brush tool? It's another type of tool inside of After Effects, and it's located on top of your screen right below the main menu. If we select the Roto Brush tool, in this case, for this clip, I have a scene where the subject is simulating a superhero landing. So to actually do this effect, what I need to do is subtract my subject from my background. And in order to understand what the Roto Brush tool is, we have to understand what rotoscoping is. And rotoscoping is the action of isolating something from your video or from your plate, meaning that you will want to remove everything but whatever it is on your selection. So what does the Roto Brush tool does? It takes a layer and applies an automatic mask based on the pixels you select. And the mask will try to follow the motion without the need to manually rotoscope every frame. So how do we use it? So the Roto Brush tool is located again on the top of your screen. Once we select the Roto Brush tool, what we have to do is we have to double click a layer, because if we simply left click, it would say use the paint, Roto Brush, and redefine edge tools in a layer panel. With these tools, double click a layer to open in a layer panel. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to double click, and now I have a layer panel open. And in this layer panel, I can start working with the Roto Brush. Okay, so one more time. For this effect, a superhero landing, my subject will come from the sky, from over here, and the camera is trying to follow it, and it lands. So somewhere at this point, I have to separate my subject from the background so I can make sure that it has the look that I want. Obviously, I'm going to have to apply a bunch of other effects behind him, and that's the reason why I want to isolate him. I want to be able to have both things. I want to have my subject, in this case the character, and I want to have the ground also in the background. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to isolate this guy from this clip. Alright, so first of all, before I go ahead and I start playing with the Roto Brush tool, I need to select a frame where I will start applying my Roto Brush tool, and for that I will try to select a frame where I have pretty much better defined pixels. So for example, this frame is pretty good and this frame is not. It's a little bit more blurred. So I think this frame is more than good enough to start. So I'm going to start right here. So what I'm going to do is, or basically what the Roto Brush does is it allows you to select some pixels, right? So in this case, my cursor is a very small dot. But if I come to my brushes palette and I change the diameter to something a little bit bigger, something around there, maybe 35, you see that the cursor is a little bit bigger now, so we can see what we're doing. I am going to start painting over my subject. And right away you can see that I have a little of a glow around those pixels that I am selecting. So I'm going to try to do my best and select as much as I can from my subject. And in this case, this brush is already too big. So again, this tool works with the brushes palette. And in here I can make changes to my brushes, or even if I'm using a pen pressure, which in this case I won't. But you can see that here I can change the roundness of my brush if I needed to make it a little different. I can change the angle. So actually that was not a good outcome. So So once I select the hand, because the hand has a very similar pixel color to this, the way I did that, I simply um, hit Alt and I middle click back and forward, and that allows me to zoom in and out to wherever I have my cursor, just so you can see a little better. In this case, the pixels from the hand and the pixels from this back pillar are in color pretty similar, so that's why After Effects is trying to grab those pixels as well. So I'm going to try to remove them, and you can see that After Effects has a great interface, or a great process, that it will try to do its best to think or know what you're trying to isolate. In this case, here, these pixels are still kind of blurred, so if I start playing with these settings and I try to select as much as I can, holding Alt and left clicking and dragging will deselect whatever you're selecting, and by left clicking and dragging you will add to your selection. So again, left click, you add to your selection, Alt and left click, you remove from your selection. This is a perfect example on how tedious this can be without the right tools or without the right precautions. In this case, this was not planned ahead. So the idea would have been to have a green screen behind him to minimize the amount of work that we're going to have to do. Once we have a selection, we can come to our layer properties, and in here we have a Roto Brush and the redefine edge new effect added to the layer. So in here we have a couple of new properties. Basically, we have a bunch of new strokes. And basically, we have a bunch of strokes. Every time I selected my subject, I created a new stroke. And in here, you can see a bunch of strokes. So just to demonstrate that, I'm going to select all these and I'm going to delete them. And that you can see that it deselected everything from my previous selection. And now on my properties, there is no strokes. So I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to hold Alt and middle mouse to zoom into my subject. And this time, I'm going to try to do only one stroke for the entire subject. Okay, so as you can see, with one stroke, I now have one foreground stroke, which is representing the selection, and I am going to hold Alt and left click this middle part to deselect that, and now I have a background, meaning that if I hide this, the first selection is telling After Effects this is everything that we're working with. So this second stroke is telling After Effects, no, wait, we don't need this part. But as you can see, I can simply select the stroke and delete it if I didn't want to, or I can make new strokes. I can simply go ahead and apply a new stroke and add a new selection, and a new foreground stroke will be added. I'm going to Control-C to undo that. Okay, so now that we have a selection, we can start playing with the settings in our viewer, and we have a few different options. Down here we have a toggle alpha, which will allow us. I'm going to press Alt and / to zoom out full screen, and this option pretty much makes a matte for us to visualize what we're working with. And it just gives you a better representation of what you're working with, and there's a few different options. This one is the one we were previously seeing, which shows just that outer glow, and this third one pretty much puts a solid color on the background, and that solid color can be adjusted by this little box right here. For example, I'm just gonna change it to a blue and I'm gonna hit OK, and it'll change right there. And we also have an opacity option. If I bump up the opacity, you'll see that it'll remove it completely. Basically, this helps us to see the edge, and pretty much the edge is pretty rough, as you can see. And from there we have these other options in the Roto Brush effect itself that we can change. So for example, these parameters, I have a contrast, a feather. If I wanted to feather this more, and now that I have zoomed in, you can see that it's starting to feather around the mask. Now the feathering went pretty high, so I'm going to press Ctrl C and I'm going to leave it as is. We can also shift the edge in or out if needed. And there's a few other parameters here. And there's a few other parameters here. So for now, we're going to continue to isolate our subject. I'm going to reduce this color opacity one more time, and I'm going to go back to the original view. And now it's time to actually follow the motion. But for that, After Effects only creates a certain amount of frames that pretty much is gonna just for you to test. So if I wanted to have this follow the motion of this character, I can simply hit the space bar, and you can see that After Effects will try to do its best to follow that motion and those pixels. Now it went around, and as you can see, it also went on rewind, and it tried to grab the pixels. Even when the pixels are so blurred out, After Effects was saying, okay, let me see where these dark pixels are going, and I'm going to try to follow them. And it's making that mask. I'm going to switch it to that view just so you can see that. And right where we start, we get our mask. And it's a pretty good mask. It's not that bad. Again, for the purpose of this, or for the purpose of this clip and what we're doing, this is going to be a good result. So in this case, After Effects or the Roto Brush tool is only working from this point to this point. But if I wanted to expand, if I hover over this gray area, you'll see that it says Roto Brush and redefine edge, span, range, and direction of automatic propagation. So we can change this if we need more space. In this case, I need to isolate the subject from the rest of the clip. So I'm gonna hit space again. And at this point, this is pretty much doing a really good job. But what I want to do is right here, I need to add another mask or another stroke, telling After Effects, I want you to remove this. Wait, that was a very small stroke, so I'm going to do that one more time. And I'm going to tell After Effects, I want you to remove as much as you can from here. And that's what it's going to try to do. So now if I continue, you'll see that it's still trying to select. However, now this hand is out of selection. So I have to come down and try to find the point where the hand goes out of selection, and you can see that is that frame. So if I go frame by frame, and I simply select this frame, and I try to select, make my brush a little smaller. Right, let's try that. And also this shoe, let's try to select it a little more, and let's continue. Okay, so right away, I don't know if you were able to see, but After Effects right there, it said, okay, these are the pixels that we're working with. What else do we have here? And here it tries to follow more, and finally there, it grabs the rest of the arm. And also I'm going to do a stroke here on the shoe, on the right shoe, just so we can have full selection, and we're going to continue. At this point, After Effects is trying to follow the motion of those colors and those pixels, and I'm doing this real time just so you can see how good of a job this is doing. Now, it's definitely not perfect. It's by far not perfect, but this is definitely a great start, and it's definitely a great time saver. So here we are running into points where the hand is now creating another space here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back maybe to this frame and unselect that, and now continue. Same. Deselect this. And let me select this right arm. Okay, you can see that this is not a one click fits all. It is necessary to continue to play with this in order to get a good result. So I'm going to do that one more time, and it continues to remove the arms because it continues to think that it's mixing with these pixels in the back, because the color are pretty similar. For now, I'm going to continue to rotoscope. I'm going to try to follow as much as I can these arms and adding strokes. Remember, this doesn't have to be perfect. As long as we have most of our subject After Effects will try to do its best. So at this point, I'm just going to let it do what it thinks it's the best outcome. And I'm also going to continue to remove some of these pixels. I lost his ear. Okay, so now I'm just going to let After Effects finish. So that's what After Effects thinks is the best outcome. Now again, as we were adding strokes, here we have a line of strokes, and they appear in time as we place them. So if I want to continue to add strokes, I simply have to do that. Find areas where the stroke is needed, or remove data, and simply have After Effects follow it, try to do its best. Now this does take some time to actually have a good result, and it takes some back and forth, and this won't be a final thing, because based on what I want to achieve or the outcome that I want for this effect, I'm going to have to clean up a little more. But you can see how with every stroke After Effects continues to update its outcome, right? So if I add another stroke, it's gonna add pixels to where they were previously removed, like for example here. I'm gonna remove that for now, and also here. Now we have a couple of issues here in the face, but that can be adjusted. Now again, it all depends on what outcome we want. So for example here, the most area that I'm gonna need isolated is gonna be this, because this is where he's gonna land, so some damage is gonna happen here, and the effect is gonna have to take place here. Now of course something like that magnitude would probably affect a little bit over, right, this area, but the majority of the effect is going to take place here. So as long as this area is properly masked, so for example this is where he lands, boom, right there, we just got to make sure that the feet are properly covered, and we have that separated from our background. Now it's coming back to one of the first frames, so it's still calculating, and because we're doing strokes back and forth, it will continue to update on the fly. But with the final outcome, we might be able to get a different result. So I'm just letting After Effects do what it thinks it's best, and also have in mind this is an HD clip, not the highest resolution available. So if you're probably working with a higher end camera and higher end clips, your outcome might be way better. So at this point where the hair is going out of, it doesn't matter, because the effect has already taken place and it's under here, but just for the sake, we are going to bring it back with the stroke, and I have to remove this area, because this area is going to have to be affected by the landing. So this one not so much, but this part down here, and okay, so we have something so far, and now I have a layer. So now I have a separation. All right, I have down here in the viewer also, I have another option to either change to masks, the view, or the anchor point. In this case, I'm just going to continue. So once we have something that we feel comfortable with, I think it's just going to be this part that I'm going to have to remove, and also that center of his hand, and let's remove that one more time. There we go. Okay, so obviously After Effects at this point will need a little bit more of redefining. For example, here, I'm going to remove this part. Now next frame, remove a little more, some from here. And next frame, add the hand. Remove this. Hand, add, remove. And still keeps removing the hand. Well, that seems to be okay now. And all right. So for now, I am gonna go back to my main comp, and here I have a plate, and as you can see, the first frames are not affected because we're telling After Effects you are only gonna Rotobrush from here. So at this point in our main comp, everything disappears until our subject kicks in and lands. All right, so but now, of course, as you can see, we have other issues, like the arm disappear for a few frames and some corrections that need to happen. We could duplicate this layer, and this layer could be just one arm, this layer could be just the head, and then add a new layer where it's just the legs. There is no right or wrong way to do this. It only changed, but have in mind that After Effects does take some juice from your computer while doing this. So if you want to do it under one layer, that would be the ideal thing. So for now, I'm going to duplicate this layer, and on this second one, I'm going to delete the Roto Brush. And now I'm going to come up here, and just so you can see effects and presets, I'm going to apply curves to this back layer, and if I wanted to make it darker, I could, but obviously this is visible, right? And if I also wanted to layer new text layer, make this much bigger, hero landing. Now you can see that the text is behind my subject, and if I leave it there, let's see how that goes. Hero, because this layer becomes an alpha mask in the following frame, I'm going to remove it, and you can see that now the text is over the second layer, and once my subject comes in, we have our landing, and now the subject is separated from the background. So now it would be time to continue and add more effects to sell this effect where we have an actual superhero landing. This text was just to show how it's staying behind our subject. I'm going to delete that text, and now you can see that we have a good, not the best, rotoscope. But I'm going to put it here. So for example, this would be where I would want the effect to happen, because this is where the hero lands, right? So let's say that I'm going to duplicate this one more time, and I'm going to make a mask, rectangular mask, like that. I'm going to change it a little bit, and since this also has a curves, just so show what we're doing. And I'm going to press F on that same layer to get the mask feathering, and I'm going to expand this feathering. And I'm going to press Control Shift H to hide the masks. And well, obviously this has to be readjusted some more, but that is the power of the Roto Brush tool that allows us to separate subjects from our backgrounds with very minimal effort. But of course, as you can see, depending on what you're working with, if you have a better footage, you might get better results. But again, this footage is a 1080 film with low-end camera, and still After Effects is doing a great job with the Roto Brush tool. Alright, so now that we have a selection, what we want to do is we want to tell After Effects that we want this effect to stay as is and take the information and store it somewhere, so it doesn't have to be processing the effect on every frame. And to do that, we have to select our Roto Brush tool, double click our layer to open the layer panel, and simply hit this freeze button. So what that's going to do, it's going to cache, and as you can see, if I hover over it, it says that it will cache and lock the Roto Brush and redefine edge propagation. So I'm going to left click on that. Alright, now that that's done, you'll see that we have a blue outline here that says Roto Brush and Refine Edge Propagation is frozen. Unfreeze to update. So that means that I can no longer make changes to this effect, and nothing is happening. The strokes are gone, and After Effects won't make any more processes, and that's pretty good because it allows you to utilize the resources of the software for other effects in other layers. I hope you guys learned something. I'll see you guys in the next one.